address the questions that many of you guys are probably asking yourselves. With the assistance of National Security Institute founder Jamil Jaffer, we're going to attempt to answer each question in about 90 seconds or so.
But before we get to that, earlier we mentioned the International Criminal Court issued the warrant, so let's discuss what the ICC actually is. So to simplify it, it's a court that was established in 1998 to investigate and, where it's warranted, try individuals charged with the most heinous crimes like genocide to the international community. Now, since the court's inception, ICC judges have issued 38 arrest warrants, and 21 of those people have been detained in the ICC detention center. 14 people remain at large, and 5 people had their charges dropped due to their deaths. And since we're on the topic of those charges, that leads us to the ICC's latest warrant on President Putin. What does this warrant actually accomplish? Nick and Jamil, we're going to take it away really quick.
Starting the timer.
Time starts now.
All right. Let's start with the charges, Jamil. The ICC says that Putin has committed the war crime of overseeing the unlawful abduction and deportation of children from Ukraine into Russia. It's been alleged thousands of children had been sent to camps in Russia for re-education. But check out this map right here. If President Putin now steps foot in any of these 123 countries that are marked in dark blue on the map, which are the ICC members, they would have a legal obligation to arrest him and send him to The Hague. So, Jamil, besides his list of destinations where he can travel drastically shrinking, what good will this arrest warrant actually do?
Probably not a whole lot, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin's still the leader of Russia. It's unlikely he's going to be brought to justice, and he's not going to travel to any of those countries. And it does send a message, but that's about all. It sends a pretty distinct message.
All right, a distinct message. Thank you, Jamil. We're going to come right back to you, but for now, Ashley Marcel, what is next on the list?
All right, let's get to our list. Considering today is the first time a lot of people are learning about the ICC, you probably have some more questions about how much authority the court really has outside of its member states, of course. It's also reasonable to wonder which states are members, which ones are not, and why. So we're going to start the clock. Nick, can you get us an answer, sir?
I've been good so far with the timer.
Yeah. It's
going
okay.
quicker than everyone thought I would. All right. So as we mentioned, Jamil, the ICC has no jurisdiction to go out and arrest a person. So in order to detain a suspect, the ICC heavily relying on the cooperation of its member states. Russia, obviously, not one of those countries. In fact, we got word from the Kremlin here. The Kremlin spokesman spoke out on Friday saying that Russia does not recognize the court, and its decision to issue a warrant was, quote, null and void. So I guess to your point again, this isn't going to do a whole lot. It is mostly symbolic here. But here's the thing. The United States is also not part of the ICC. Jamil, why is that? And be honest with us. Do you think it has anything to do with the fact the United States record isn't exactly squeaky clean either when it comes to wars and, let's be honest, invasions?
You know, I don't think so. I think the main reason, the way this whole thing began, right, was that the United States actually signed the Rome Statute, which actually created the ICC back in the Clinton administration. But the Clinton administration never submitted the treaty to the Senate for its ratification because they realized that the Senate was not going to support it. There are debates about whether American service members might be hauled into the ICC and indicted for war crimes trumped up by the International Criminal Court. And ultimately, the Bush administration back in 2002 actually withdrew from the ICC and said we are not going to be subject to this jurisdiction. Even though we signed it, we never did ratify it. That's part of why we're not in. It's part of the concerns about the American Service Members Protection Act, which was passed by Congress as well. All
right. Thank you, Jamil. Stick with us. Once again, we're going to toss it on over to Ashley and Marcel.
A lot of good information there. So this all leads to, on Friday, Chinese president will also be heading to Russia early next week to meet with President Putin. This trip will be China's first since Russia invaded Ukraine. Yeah, that's a big deal considering the U.S. hasn't been on the best of terms with either country lately. Many are wondering whether this meeting warrants some concern. Nick, I'm going to hit start. Go ahead.
All right. Jamil, so far China has tried to present itself as a neutral peace broker on Ukraine. China's foreign minister said that the trip is to, quote, urge peace and promote talks with Russia. Do you buy that? Should the West, as Ashley said, be worried about a deepening in ties between the Kremlin and Beijing?
You know, Nick, I don't buy it for a second. The idea that China's going to be a fair broker in the middle of this is not realistic. Right before Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, as we knew it was going to happen, the Chinese and the Russians entered into a, quote, no-limits partnership. Since then, the Chinese have refused to even call it an invasion. They've just looked at it sort of as a border dispute. We all know it's a lot more than that. We know about the things that Vladimir Putin has done. The Chinese, rather than pushing back on Russia or doing anything to support the Western and almost unified worldview on what's going on there, instead have gone the other way. They've supplied non-lethal weaponry. And as the president revealed a few weeks ago, or the vice president did, and Secretary of State, they're considering providing lethal assistance. That may take place after this visit to Moscow next Monday through Wednesday. So we'll see what happens. But the Chinese, not a middle ground broker, not trying to cut deals. They're supporting Russia in this whole effort.
So I guess my next question to you is, are you worried? I mean, this arrest warrant for Putin, that's, you could say, an escalation in what was already a very tense situation here. The recent drone incident, Jamil, was a reminder how close we are at any time to having things get out of hand. I mean, do you worry that we are heading down an inevitable path now of direct conflict with Russia, a nation with nuclear weapons?
Look, I think the United States is going to do its level best, along with the other NATO allies, to stay out of an actual force-on-force conflict with Russia. We've been successful doing that thus far. If the Chinese begin supplying the Russians with weaponry, that will embolden the Russians to push harder in Ukraine. It'll make it that much more important that we continue to supply the Ukrainians with what they need to win. It also explains really why we should have done a lot more earlier on to help the Ukrainians be successful. The fact this war has gone on for a year, it's likely to stretch out longer if the Chinese get involved. I don't think we'll see force-on-force between the U.S. and Russia, but you never know. As you point out with that drone thing, it was
real quick,
problem.
Jamil, what do you mean when you say we should have done a lot more? I mean, what more could we do besides give weapons to Ukraine in a situation that's already very tense?
Well, we've been slowly upping the amount of weaponry. It took us a while to get to tanks. Those tanks haven't even arrived as yet. Now we're starting to supply fighter jets, or the Poles are starting to supply fighter jets. If we had done that a lot earlier, tanks much earlier in the conflict, we could have allowed the Ukrainians to bring the fight really to the Russians in a way that they would have won. Instead of this war being a stalemate, they might actually be victorious on the battlefield right now. That's unfortunate. This war has gone on this long. 7,000 plus civilians dead, over 400 children. That's a real tragedy.
All right, Jamil Jaffer, as always, thank you, sir, for coming on the show. We do appreciate it. Guys, we'll be right back after the break. Stick around.